Do you read a lot, Geoff?
Yes, mostly nonfiction. So this was my first foray into fiction.
Hey, do you read Clive Cussler's books?
I have read. When I was, I don't know, still in school, I used to read more fiction. I haven't read fiction books probably since I was in my mid-30s.
Man, I love his books.
Oh, good.
I love his books. I'm reading a book right now about Sam Adams. It's a very good book.
Oh, now see that would be my yeah.
It's a great book. He's an untold character in American history that we don't cover enough.
I mentioned him on at least 4 or 5 sermons a year.
Yeah, he's a sharp guy. All right, we'll get into this.
Cussler, you mentioned?
No. Sam Adams.
Sam Adams.
Sam, what a great American.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
All right, here comes our introduction music.
Rain inside.
Here we go. 3, 2, 1.
Boom! And welcome to the Big Honker Podcast, brought to you by Mossberg, home of the 940 Waterfowl Gun of the Year in my books. I am Geoff Stanfield with the world famous Andy Shaver.
I'm here.
And remember, Hook and Gaff got a watch giveaway. We will be drawing a name at Squad Fest. Holler at us. You don't have to be present to win. Andy will have all the stuff up on social media tomorrow on the giveaway for the Hook and Gaff watch.
Maybe today.
Maybe today. There you go. So anyways, with us today from Wichita Falls High School, my classmate, probably the most interesting guy that I graduated with, because we graduated in a very boring class because nobody's really done nothing with their life exceptional.
Boy.
They haven't.
Okay.
Geoff Broughton.
Wow.
Geoff, who in our class do you think of as doing something exceptional? I can't think of anybody.
Was J.W. Oliver not in your class?
JW was a couple years older.
Oh, okay. Well.
The thing is, Geoff, I moved away from Texas, in '92, so I've lost track of most everybody outside of social media. But yeah, most of us have led quiet lives as the remnant of the latchkey kids generation.
I would say, but I'm honest. We graduated with 400 kids, and nobody's done nothing exceptional that I know of. Everybody has, a lot of people have really great lives, and that's good. But you find a class that's got 47 kids in it, and they got a kid that's a famous heart surgeon or something. We don't have nobody.
Let me ask you
damn
this.
Underachievers.
And this is a total sidetrack. Do you think that the days of high school reunions are over with?
Yes.
I'm coming up on my 20th. We did our 10th, and it was kind of fun, but I mean, we got social media now. Anybody that I wanted to keep up with that I graduated with, I know everything about them. You know what I mean? So it's not like they're going to blow my socks off whenever I see them at their 20-year reunion. Like, hey, I got 3 kids and 2 divorces. It's like, I knew it already.
Right. Yeah. Well, yeah, I haven't been to one. So
right.
I went to my 10. It was okay. A lot of the people that I wanted to see weren't there, so I really didn't care.
Right.
And we're approaching our 40th in a couple of years, and man, it'll be a bunch of damn old people there is all that I'm going to think of. I can't think of no other reason to.
Right. I've missed that whole thing has missed my generation. Cause I see the baby boomers and like they've had 50 and 60 and like they got this big turnout. And then you look at mine and like nobody's really excited about it.
Because
I think you're on to something. I think social media has kind of gotten rid of that. I already know how old all my classmates are.
Right.
Yeah. And they are old. The women,
they know how old I look too, right?
Yeah. Well, the women have aged worse than the men in our class. There's no doubt about that.
That's an unfortunate thing of there is a difference between men and women, right?
I have noticed, Andy, that's what you said is very, very true.
Right.
Because a lot of times when I was younger and like people like Geoff, you'd move off and you go off somewhere. And if I was still in Wichita Falls and I went to, Cheyenne, which was the club to go to when we were in our early 20s.
Yep.
And at Christmas time or Thanksgiving, you would see friends that you hadn't seen from the Thanksgiving or Christmas before that were in town visited.
Right.
But you know, now with social media, people can stay connected the whole time, which we didn't have that. So yeah, I'm assuming that high school reunions will be about like everything else in our country that's going away.
Gone.
And it makes sense.
Hey, is P2 still open?
Yes.
Oh, okay, cool.
P2 will be open way probably before we're gone, way after we're gone. It's probably still the trendiest, coolest place in Wichita Falls, and probably will forever just because of how it's ran. A place you can drive up and get a beer in your truck.
Very good.
Very good. So you're a preacher in Pierce, Colorado.
Yes, sir.
A town of 1,100. Is that all you do is be a preacher, or do you have another job also?
No, I also teach history in a small private Christian school.
What do you think about? I think if I had a kid, especially in a big city, I would want my kids to go to school. I would love for my grandkids to go to a private Christian charter school if they had them. And we're in a small town, so it's not needed as much as the big cities. So you're dealing with kids. Do y'all still discipline your kids at your school then?
You know, there is discipline in the schools. I don't know that it's corporate like what we used to get, get licks from Mr. Huddleston in seventh grade. But no, I don't think we handle that. But I'm kind of like with you, even in a small town, and I think that our school district here is probably very conservative, and they've done a pretty good job of keeping that stuff out. I know some of the teachers, but I wouldn't want to have my kids in public school. It's one of the reasons why I'm involved in the private school.
School has gotten so far away from what it was when we were kids.
Right.
The youth of today, they've lost the magic. They don't have, it's hard to find a kid in third or fourth grade that still believes in Santa. And I know it's a magical and it's just a make-believe thing, but man, that was a great time as a kid. All the magical stuff that went with being a kid that they have been robbed of with society today.
I think the screens probably do a lot of that too, man. The kids are so old, so much older than we were at the same age.
Yes.
And so the fact that they have, phones and tablets and they have a whole world open to them that, you and I used to have to go out, run around and play in the mud, and they can play Roblox. Mm-hmm. So it's just a different time, and I really feel like they're going to be worse off for it. All the adventures and imagination that we used to have. I joke with my wife, who's from Australia, and Australia probably about 20 years ahead of us in the bubble wrap culture. I'm like, we used to ride around on our bicycles, throwing rocks at each other, holding trash can lids, BB gun fights and stuff like that. And I don't necessarily think that, maybe that's not the best way, but goodness me, man, we've raised at least one generation, if not two, of really, really soft people.
Yes.
I saw something interesting the other day. They took all the toys out of like the kindergarten classroom and how much better those kids performed when the toys were taken out of the classroom. At first, the parents were like, what are they going to do all day? They don't have any toys to play with. But like they noticed like after like a 3-day mark, like kids were using their imaginations. They were making up games. And that also translated into some of the tests that they were taking. Like, you're not going to get a 5-page essay out of a kindergartner, but like they could see marked improvements on everything that they would measure at that time. So, and it was something just as simple as taking the toys out of the classroom.
Right.
We
they've done a lot of studies with the screens and stuff with
poison.
With kids, it's just incredible.
Well, depression's way up, anxiety's way up and especially it hits young girls more than it does young boys because they girls are always a little bit more anxious or what's the word I'm looking for? Not paranoid, but anyway, the depression hits young girls worse than young boys, and the anxiety hits young girls, especially preteens going into puberty.
I think a lot of that though. is we've mixed our schools. And I'm not talking about skin color. I'm talking about economically. I grew up and went to a poor elementary, so everyone in my class was poor just about. So we all had the same things. You got a kid sitting in your class that's got the newest of everything, the newest toy, the newest bike, going on ski trips, blah, blah, blah. Oh, the other kids feel bad because they don't have that, and it causes a lot of jealousy. Especially, I never thought about this until older Christmas time with Santa Claus. Your kid's in a class with all poor kids. Well, Santa's about the same for everybody. We didn't know there was a rich Santa and a poor Santa.
Santa's shitty all the way around.
Yeah, but the kids that went to Ben Franklin and Wichita Falls, they had a good Santa Claus because they had all that money at Country Club, old money, you know. But I didn't know that because I didn't go to elementary with them. So I think kids today also mixed in. I think that hurts them. I didn't think about the toys, but when I was in elementary, we didn't have toys in our class.
Right.
No.
I mean, we had to go to school to learn.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So.
But we also had art class, music class, and playground every day. And kids today don't get that every day.
Right.
And I think that hurts. At y'all's Christian school, do y'all's kids get those classes every day?
Oh, absolutely. Music, languages, art, and I kind of joke. Even in the upper school where I teach high school, we give these kids a chance to go outside, run around, and get some energy out. So that's kind of an important, especially for the young men. You can't keep them cooped up in a classroom all day and expect them to perform at their best.
Yeah.
So that's a big
They
deal.
need dodgeball.
Well, and they need, they need vitamin D, and they need to get rid of that testosterone. And listen, schools were designed to make good factory workers. That's it.
Yeah,
Sit in the classroom. You're going to sit in a row. When the bell rings, you're going to be conditioned to go to your next station. And it was all a big ploy to make good workers. And that's what it's done.
Yep.
Especially if you look at, I can't remember what it was. I think who was it that took over the education system? It might have been
The Department of Education didn't come in until
was it Eisenhower?
I
No,
think it was
Carter.
Yeah.
Carter. And we were number one in the
yeah.
world. And now we're at we're in the low 20s now. Since the invention of the Department of Education.
before.
The big thing on that, just real quickly, because this is kind of a passion of mine, is going to social studies and away from classical education.
Yeah.
Classical education was very, very generalized, and so now you have like everything specialized, and you have these kids. Goodness me, the stuff that 5 years ago is already out.
Yeah.
It's going so fast. The classical education model, gives you a more well-rounded education. We like to, at our school, we say that, public schools teach you, how to think and what to do, where a classical model teaches you how to think and what to do, what being the right thing, and how to process thoughts.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, that's the main thing. History is the only class that can change from decade to decade. Math is going to be math, and science is going to be science. Right. The boiling point,
math
the freezing,
is not math no more,
and the freezing points. It's all going to be the same. Like the laws have been established, and that's your groundwork. But 10 years from now, there's no telling if Trump gets reelected, and he does what he says he's going to do regarding 9/11. That's going to completely transform the way 9/11 is taught in a social studies class, because he had said that he's going to declassify everything regarding 9/11, everything regarding the JFK assassination. That's going to change the way that a social study teacher lectures on the JFK assassination and 9/11.
Do you teach the JFK in your class?
Well, my classes are older, so I don't have the modern history. I do church history and medieval European history.
Oh, wow.
And I teach some of the humanities stuff as well. But the thing is, though, I don't want to turn this dark or anything, but do you really think that, I think it's a very good chance that he's going to win the election. Do you think they're really going to let him take office?
Yeah.
With everything with everything they've already done?
This man thinks like we do.
I think if they don't, it will be
Civil War.
It will be bad for our nation. It's going to be a major, major divide in our nation. And I don't know how we would overcome it without bloodshed.
I don't think that.
Right.
I
Well,
think if he wins, I think they're going to have a hard time not letting him take office because our side has got so many weapons and stuff. I don't think they would do that. I can see them preventing him from winning though, but I don't.
yeah.
I
That
don't.
part, I see him trying to cheat again. They're going to try to cheat, but I don't see them keeping him from getting his hand on that Bible. Because I think if they do that, they're already the walls are falling out from under the Democrats right now. They're eating themselves, and I absolutely love this. I mean,
Me
I
too.
absolutely it's so great to see what's happening with them, but I don't think so. Back to Andy though, and go. You said math has changed now because I got this stupid math they teach. So
Yeah, but the
Right.
principles are the
Yes.
same. You're going to get to the same outcome.
Math-
You're never going to get to a point where 3 + 3 = 9.
yes, that part. But the new way they teach math is pretty ridiculous. Anyways, Jeff, back to I wanted to ask you about JFK. If you were teaching class and you had to teach JFK to your class, what would you tell them?
Oh boy, that would be fun. I mean, this is. I'll tell you what I teach. All right, that what was it? Mark Twain said, history doesn't repeat, but it rhymes.
Yeah.
and and everything goes in cycles. So you think that they wouldn't take Trump out. They couldn't take Trump out. I don't know how old Andy is, but you and I were alive when they tried to take out
Yes,
Reagan.
we were, but we didn't realize it was a concerted effort.
Well, and they took out Nixon.
Right.
The CIA took out Nixon too via
Yeah, exactly.
Impeachment.
So exactly. I mean, what we've seen since Nixon would make what he did like just laughable. That's so clearly. I mean, we've become so cynical now that we can look back on that and see how trumped up all that was. And I mean, I was too young to really be a Nixon fan, but I mean, history is history. And I will tell you this, that when you study the Roman Empire, we're at that stage, we're at that choke point. And like I said, I don't want to make this all dark or anything, but the worst part about that debate between Trump and Biden was that it forced people to sit there and realize that we don't have a president.
Yeah.
Right. That we don't have an elected president.
No.
But there's a guy in the office, but he ain't running anything.
No.
And like, I know that I've not believed he's been running anything the entire time. I think most people on the right probably have felt that way. They've had to confront that. And the fact that he's still in office after that performance, that this is a person who has the nuclear codes, we somewhere along the line, we passed over into the fact that we don't have an elected president. There's a guy that sits in the office, and like Trump. One of the things I thought that was really impressive is that he had both parties against him, and he still got stuff done. Like I said, I don't want to be real dark, and the thing is that about every 80 to 90 years we go through, and every 80 to 90 years we have to go through and we have to re-earn our liberty. We have to re-earn our freedom. The last generation that did that was the GIs, in World War II. We're coming onto that age where we're gonna have to step through the crucible and earn it. 70 to 80 years before that, you had the war between the states, or the Civil War. Before that, 70, 80 years before that was the Revolution, which was really a civil war if you think about it.
Thank you. I've said that too, and Geoff always makes fun of me for saying that. It was a civil war.
What?
The American Revolution was a civil war. It was England.
It was a civil war and an invasion at the same time. Right. And what most people don't realize about that, and this American history is a passion of mine, the conflict was, it was Parliament that was passing these laws, and the colonies weren't under Parliament, and that was their issue. And they went to the king and said, "Hey, king, you need to intercede because Parliament doesn't have authority over us. You're our king, but they're not our Parliament." And and I don't think that's taught. I've read modern American history books, and that's so glossed over that people don't really understand. understand what was at stake. But we're at that point now. I don't know. Texas is still red, but Colorado is run by Denver and Boulder. We reinstituted wolves, right? But the people who voted for that aren't the people that own ranches, right? They're the people who live in gated communities and in the big cities. I always sit there because I got rancher friends. I said, let's trap a bunch of them and take them into Boulder and let them deal with the consequences of what they were voting on. So we're at that point. I was testifying before the state house, and both parties were up there like, well, we have representative government. I'm like, I don't feel represented. I don't think either party represents my views or values. It's just the Coke Pepsi nonsense. So anyway, didn't mean to rabbit trail.
Can I ask you something about that? The English, the first American settlers that came over here.
Yep.
They didn't come over here seeking a better life, did they? They came over here as an extension of England.
There was.
Like they weren't trying to escape something in England, were they?
The Plymouth colony.
Well, some were. There was religious persecution going on in England and in Europe, but it was a mix. So you had the Protestants who weren't really liked very much by the Anglicans. Which was the state religion in England, and so they wanted to leave, and that was kind of the big emphasis of them coming over. But there was a lot of it. It was it was people seeking adventure. It's the same thing when we moved west.
Right.
Like there were Greeley, Colorado was founded by teetotalers that wanted a place free from alcohol. And they named it after Greeley's that go west, but there were also the adventure seekers, the people who were looking for gold. And it was the same thing coming over from England. You had people looking for an opportunity as well as escaping persecution. Right. And there was religious persecution in England.
Wasn't there? The Plymouth colony was funded by the King of England, unless I'm mistaken on this, to set up a fort or a colony here to compete with the French and the Dutch West Indies that were trapping at Manhattan and on up towards Montreal. And he wanted to get his foothold on America, so he sent them over there with the excuse that they were escaping. Was it the Church of England? What was the church? It was the Church of England?
The Anglican Church was the Church of England.
To get away from
them. Multiple things can be true at the same time. In England, set up the charters. The Crown set up the charters because they needed, they wanted to have their foothold in the New World because of all the wealth. I mean, you got to remember, and here's something that you may not know: all those families are all related, right? Yes. The English royalty and the French royalty, they're all related. They're all from the same families. But they wanted to get there. So both things were true. There were people who were looking to set up a new life, a new adventure. There were people who were looking to escape persecution, and England went along with it because they wanted to have their piece of that money, because they realized that was going to be a huge revenue stream they could use to fight each other.
Right. See, and one thing I think is like they all got over here, and then they were like, well, why am I going to take orders from somebody who's an ocean away from me when I can just set up my own system here? We can set up our own system.
You're close, and opinion wise.
Right.
I mean, the thing is that we can all read history, and we weren't there. What happened is that these people kind of got out here, and they were isolated, and they were allowed to have a lot of autonomy that you didn't have in England. And by the time you had a people who were raised up in that, it was like, wow, this is really good. The problem came when the war between England and France. England needed money.
Mm-hmm.
And so they're like, hey, here we got all these rich colonists, right? Let's get money from them. And it was, at least the accounts that I read, it was not really a matter of, hey, we don't want to pay our fair share. It was, these aren't the people who are in charge of us, meaning Parliament. It was more, hey, we've got our own government. If the king needs money, let him come in. We'll pass the taxes, which is why you see that the U.S. Congress is supposed to be where the tax bills are written, because we wanted to be taxed by the house that was most accountable to the people. But I mean, multiple things are true. So yeah, they had gotten all this autonomy, and they didn't really want to give it back.
Right.
They had become, and it's the same thing with the West. When we moved west, the people in the West had a different mindset, because they were the more hardy people that had to carve something out of nothing and make something that didn't exist before. And then people who are dealing with old money, are like, oh, no, you got to bring this in line. And there was a pushback with that.
Yeah.
And I think we're going to have that again too. Well, we don't have a North versus South. We have a rural versus urban. And I think that either something's going to happen on the world stage that's going to get us all to come back together as a nation, or we're going to end up, shooting each other. Like I said, every generation has to go through this, and we're at that point now.
Yeah, I've seen those videos where it outlines 70 to 80 years. You've got this great disturbance, and then you've got the fallout from that, and then you've got the rebuilding, and then you've got the fall back into a necessity for whatever event it is that's going to get everybody kind of back in line. And it happened, like you said, 70 to 80 years is kind of that sweet spot. And it's gone back, like you said, just almost as far back as we can see in human history.
Can you imagine being a World War II vet? And there's still some alive out there. There's some people that stormed the beaches in Normandy that are still alive. But to think that their generation, they lost all their young friends. So many classmates, brothers, cousins, neighbors died fighting for this great country. And for 25 years, they saw this huge growth of everything's good. And then in the last 20 years, everything that they fought and worked hard for has been just completely thrown away. And that's so tragic to me, because young kids today, I'm glad you teach history, because young kids today don't have a clue about history. If you went to I can't say a mall because nobody goes to a mall no more. If you went to a public gathering and you talked to 16-year-old kids and you said, what happened on December 7th, 1941?
Right. Most of them wouldn't know.
Don't have a clue. They don't know who we fought in World War II. They don't know who we fought in World War I. They don't know how Sarajevo, Yugoslavia played a big role in World War I. They don't know nothing no more. And I just don't understand why it's so bad. What's so much more important than learning about your history?
Well, the thing is, and go back to Andy talking about we train factory workers, right? Is that, if you can control the history, if you can control the past, you can control the future. Sure. And that goes all the way back to all the way past Hitler, past Lincoln. I mean, the autocrats always understood that, if you can control the history, you control the past, you'll control the future. And that's where we're at now.
Okay. All right, let's go back to my original question. What are you going to teach them about JFK?
I don't really know. The honest thing is that, I'm crazy. I believe that Oswald killed him. It was part of a conspiracy. And I believe that the CIA was in on the conspiracy. I believe that the mafia was in on the conspiracy. And much like Lincoln, he went after the bankers and started talking about monetary policy and all the other stuff they could probably deal with, but they weren't going to let him touch that, because that's really the control of the country.
What do you think? I think LBJ was involved in JFK's murder.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. And like I said, I think the CIA either planned it or covered it up, let it happen. And I'm voting for Trump, but I listened to RFK talk about all that stuff, and the stuff that he talks about is like that's not that was his life. He grew up in that, and the stuff I think that kind of holds a little bit of weight, and so it would be nice to get the history of that. So yeah, I'm a conspiracy theorist, but I do believe that Oswald was one of the shooters. I believe there were multiple, but I believe Oswald was one of the shooters.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I'm not discrediting that Oswald was a shooter, but I do not think that he was the only shooter that day. Especially if you look at like that magic bullet theory, like you're going to account for like 5 or 6 wounds with one bullet, and then they find it and it's pristine. Like, come on.
Right.
Come on.
It was like finding the passport in 9/11.
Yeah, right. Yeah, perfectly intact.
Yeah.
We know about JFK. Well, they also killed RFK. There's no doubt about that. The way that all went down.
Yep.
I think they killed Martin Luther King.
Yep.
I think they killed Malcolm X.
Yeah. Or whether they did it or set it up or allowed it to happen, that I think they were involved.
Yes, me too. I don't know that they had one of their agents pull the trigger, but they did not suppress whoever was going to kill him. I think they probably even fed him some money to do it. And and I think there's a lot of other people in our country. I think the CIA killed John F. Kennedy Jr. I do. I don't think that was just a random plane crash. I think they were involved with that. There's a big conspiracy theory that they killed the guy that was in Fast and the Furious. I don't know if that's true or not, over the Epstein stuff.
I'm sure that's fake.
I don't know. But I mean, there's nothing our government can do that would shock me. I mean, they have stolen an election to put up a puppet up there. The CIA runs our country. They run the world. And it's bad actors behind it that are doing all that. And we just pleasantly take it. So I hope if Trump gets in office, I hope he does fill all this out. And I would like to see how it will change the history books, because we're going to find out 9/11 was a George Bush conspiracy. And we're going to find out that the CIA did a whole lot of terrible things in the world. And I think we're going to get rid of the IRS and the Department of Education if he gets involved.
Now, here's the thing. You said all that out loud, right? And all that sounds great. If these people are really running the country, I'm gonna ask you again. Do you really think they're going to let all that happen?
No, because
that doesn't happen without bloodshed.
I think
it just doesn't.
I think here's my early take. Trump has not announced his VP pick. It's going to be an insider. I think it's going to be Rubio.
Why?
Because I think that the powers that be they know Trump's going to win. They can't cheat enough to get Biden back in office. So
they're going to pick their president.
So they're going to pick their insider to kind of rein Trump in. And Marco Rubio is that career politician, that insider to this. You can say we have 2 parties in America. We have one. I'm sorry to say it. We have one party and they're running everything. And they're going to be like, okay, Trump's going to get in, but this is going to be our inside guy. That's what I think.
You don't think it's going to be Haley? I know that.
No.
God, I hope not.
I mean, I think that would be the same as Rubio. That's another insider. I hope that it's Tulsi, but I think she's too much of an outsider that the powers that are running the show are not going to let it be.
Right, that's something we would want.
Yeah, right.
That's somebody we would want. Right, they're not going to give us something we want. It's going to be like Reagan having to pick Bush as his VP.
Right, yeah, like an insider. Or
Nixon, Gerald Ford.
Clinton and Al Gore, Bush Jr. and Cheney. They always get their guy as the number 2. Mm-hmm. So that's my early prediction. Call me a crazy conspiracist, but like the more and more stuff I see, the more and more Rubio's name keeps coming up, and like now all of a sudden he's Trump's buddy, and he's out there beating the bush for banging the trash can for Trump. So that's my early pick.
But before we get into
and that's going to make it very hard for me to vote for him, because I really really like what RFK Jr. has to say about a lot of things.
Okay,
so. If Trump picks Rubio,
he gives me a stomachache every time you say that.
He makes a lot of sense.
On some things he does, but some things he's a Democrat. So,
but that's what I like about him, is that he's not pushed to one side.
Well, he has zero chance of winning.
Because I can I don't know, Jeff. 70% of Americans say that Biden Trump is not a ticket that they want to see.
But 55% of them are going to vote for Donald Trump. I'm telling you right now, if RFK was the Democratic nominee, I wouldn't have near as much anxiety as I have with Biden over there cheating. But they don't like him, and that's another reason that I could like him a little bit. Is the Democrats hate him, but he's still a Democrat. I can't imagine what it would look like if he win. He's not going to win. Where they screwed up was they should have had primary elections and let him be on all the ballots. Then they could go over from Biden and say, hey, this guy here is the second choice. We need to take him.
So you would be fine with a Trump-Rubio ticket?
No, I didn't say that at all. No, I do not like Marco Rubio at all, but I'd like Trump in anybody. I would take Trump and a dog turd over RFK. He's a Democrat. I'm sorry. I don't trust him. He's a Democrat.
If we'd have had a podcast in 2015, 2016, Jeff would have said the same thing about Donald Trump. He did say the same thing about Donald Trump. Trump's he's just a New York City Democrat.
He was
all that I heard.
And he proved me wrong.
Because I was a big fan of Trump back in 2015 and 2016. And all I heard from everybody out here was that he's just a New York City Democrat. He's voted Democrat for everything. And so anyway.
Yeah, Jeff, I'm gonna take up for you for a second, man. Trump proved a lot of people.
He did.
Yeah.
He did. No, I'm not denying any of it.
Until COVID. COVID, he proved a lot of people.
That's how powerful that deep state is. They got the whole world to shut down, including China. I mean, you got to really think about that, because COVID is going around right now. Mm-hmm. There ain't a person I know of in the last 3 years that's died from COVID or nothing at all. They put those people in those hospitals. They put them on the ventilators. They give them that Resveratrol or whatever it is, and it killed them. And that's how they kept control of everything. I look back, I got some Facebook memories of mine from when that happened, and I thought, boy, I was one dumb guy back then. I was like, stay home, by gosh, if you go out, wear your mask at first. But I noticed by about May 1st, I was done with all that. But for about 6 weeks, they had me going just like everybody else. But nobody gets sick from it now. But you got the whole world to close their businesses. Mm-hmm. People went bankrupt, and there's still people going around right now that still would do it all over again today and would slap a mask on tomorrow and get on to you for not wearing a mask.
Right. And just to prove that history repeats itself, all those neighbors calling in on their fellow citizens to turn them in proves that what happened in Germany would happen here.
100%. Yeah.
I will tell you, Jeff, on that one, we didn't close our church. We wrote up a religious exemption for people who went to churches where their churches were shut down and their pastors wouldn't do anything for them. And we had just basically like a boilerplate religious exemption to help these people out. One of the reasons I left the Republican Party was county commissioners that, matter of fact, I got a meeting with one of the county commissioners tomorrow, to go basically read the Riot Act, because he calls himself a Christian. But, I went and, we fought, and who came after us when we left our church open? It was the other churches.
Really?
Yeah, so it wasn't the heathen that came after us. It was the state-run churches that came after us. That is proof that this generation has to earn their liberty. Mm-hmm. Because we didn't. We rolled over and we gave our belly up, and man, I'll tell you that by the time the 15 days was up, it was obvious it was a scam.
Yeah. Yep.
But by the time that we got into the end of March, and by the time we got into Easter of that year, we were trying to get all the churches. Hey, you need to open up. This is wrong. What's going on? And then, interestingly enough, the COVID shot. I love y'all's sweatshirt, by the way. That's awesome. The unvaxxed
we'll send you one.
Sweatshirt.
Unvaxxed, overtaxed.
We'll send you one.
Right. That was after the CDC director went on national TV and told people it didn't keep you from getting it, didn't keep you from spreading it. Right. And, my wife lost her job at the hospital. in March 2020, or April 2020, she's one of the heroes because as a nurse, she's on the front lines. A year later, they're firing her for not being a lab rat.
Mm-hmm.
So that period, we all as a people have to come to account that when we were faced with tyranny, we gave our belly up.
100%.
And
we followed communist China's role.
Exactly.
Communist China. We followed exactly what they did during COVID, and that was shut everything down, shut the businesses down, and that's what we did as Americans. That's what we gave up.
And the fact that it was a Chinese bioweapon in the first place, but the people who run our country don't care.
No.
Right.
I listen to a lot of Dr. Peterson, and he says you have to you cannot read history like you are the victim. You have to read history like you're the perpetrator. You're not Anne Frank and an addict.
Right.
You are a Nazi. And he cited just what you said. He said, how many people were so delighted to call the authorities that their neighbors were having a gathering and weren't 6 feet apart and they weren't wearing masks? People reveled in that fact that they could call the authorities and get churches shut down. They're not 6 feet apart. So he said, anybody that reads history and thinks of themselves as the victim is reading history wrong, because you will 100% roll over.
We we live in a small town like you do. So I'm small West Texas, small West Colorado. It's about the same. We didn't have a lot. Our churches were shut down for a little bit. It wasn't a long time.
We did the 2 weeks.
The 2 weeks deal. And then we were back, and by, let's say that was March 15th. By May 1st, there wasn't a person in my town wearing a freaking mask anywhere. We were done.
Right.
We'd have to take it somewhere else. I remember I had a mask in my truck that would have dust on it, because that's how often I'd wear the dang thing. But when I'd go to the city, get on a plane, have to wear the stupid stuff. And we didn't conform to all their rules. And it's sad that there were so many people that did. But we went to Boston that summer, like the late June, about this time of year. Me and Michelle went to Boston, and in Texas, everything was open by then again, just about. We get to Boston, and there's cars with dust a half-inch thick on them that are parked. The streets, there's nobody on the streets or stuff, and I'm like, and I noticed how bad it was going to be when we landed at the airport at Midway Airport in Chicago, O'Hare. I can't remember which airport we were in, but we left Dallas, and you could get something to eat at the airport, and things were open still. Everybody's wearing a mask, but the stuff was open. We got to Chicago, and it was boarded up like I was in Moscow in 1982.
Right.
And I was like, what the hell is going on? It's an imaginary line in the air, and for some reason, on this side of the line, you have freedoms, and on this side of the line, you don't. And it's sad, the liberal areas. But the media drove those people, and they never could show the other side that we were living and how we were doing. Because people would ask me, you mean y'all don't wear a mask at home? Hell no. I'd have guys show up here from out of state to come hunt that first fall, and they'd show up and they'd all have masks on in their car, and they'd look up and they'd like, nobody's wearing a mask? Hell no, we ain't wearing a mask. You wouldn't see a mask again until they left. They'd put them on to go back to the airport. It's just asinine the way it is. I had a friend of mine I talked to yesterday, a good friend of mine, and he's a conservative person, but he watches the regular news and stuff. And he told me, he was talking about the debate, and he goes, I was absolutely shocked how bad Biden was. He goes, were you? I go, no. He goes, you weren't? I said, no. I said, he's been in that way. I said, that's why they put him in the basement in 2019 when he was campaigning, or 2020. I said, no, not at all. I've seen them deals of him stumbling, him having to walk him wandering around and stuff. But he goes, man, my buddies, he works with a bunch of liberals. He goes, they just are shocked completely that the way how bad he's gotten just recently. It ain't just recently. He's been that bad the whole time. And they just don't realize that. And that's why I think that they're Kamala, his wife, the Obamas, Nancy Pelosi, everybody that's been in meetings with him knows what they've been dealing with for 2 or 3 years. And now it's all starting to leak how bad it's been. They should go to jail for treason for that. That the commander-in-chief has got dementia, and all his executive orders should be null and void. Because
and that's why he's still in office.
Yes, but they should invoke the 25th Amendment. I hope they don't. I want him to run because he's going to get beat. He may lose 48 states, 49 states is what he could lose. But if you go to court, if you sign a document, an official document, I don't care if you buy insurance, I don't care if it's a bank note or what. If you're under the influence of drugs or alcohol and you can prove that makes that contract null and void. If you're a judge, and you go to court and you're inebriated, that you can't make a ruling. That's against the rules.
Right.
Right.
Anything that he's done as president should be null and void because he has
passed by power of the pen, is what you're saying.
Yes, anything that he signed, not anything that's been voted on, but if he signed an executive order like he has on the border and stuff, none of that should count because he hasn't known what the hell he's been doing. Somebody somewhere should be accountable for everything he signed as an executive order and should be held accountable for that.
Well, go back to when they, they decided not to prosecute him for the classified documents, right? The thing that everybody heard, he's a feeble old man with memory problems.
Yeah.
Well, that wasn't their words, and he's still president.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, the thing is that, just across the border in Cheyenne, or actually Laramie, Wyoming, during COVID, a young girl went to school and refused to wear a mask. They took her out in handcuffs.
Wow.
That's stupid.
Right. And I can tell you, that if they'd have done that to my daughter, they'd have had to take me out in handcuffs. Mm-hmm. Right.
Yeah.
The same thing with all these boys, playing girl sports. They would have to arrest me, before I would allow my kids to be subjected to that. Until that moment happens, that defining moment where, okay, enough is enough, right? When a long train of abuses, right? Events as a design, right? We just went through Independence Day. We haven't got to that point yet, but I suspect that it's coming, and then our generation will have to secure the liberties, for our kids and grandkids and great grandkids. It's just the way of it. Geoff, I love your optimism. I'm optimistic that there's enough people, there's enough Andy Shavers out there, there are people who will step up and meet the need when it happens. It's just kind of frustrating waiting for that moment to happen that galvanizes everybody into action.
I'll tell you what shocks me about the girls' sports deal is I only had boys. We had 3 boys, but I've got a couple of granddaughters, and they're both athletic, and they both like to play sports. And our oldest one now is 10. And if Dylan in 3 or 4 years, let's say she's running track for where she goes to high school at, and she's running the state meet or a district meet or any other, and there's a shim running against her.
Right.
I'm going to tell her, don't run. If all of you girls will not run, they shoot that gun, let him go running off all by himself. And you stay there and make such a spectacle of an embarrassment of things, that crap will go away. Those girls swimming in that NCAA swim meet with that, whatever that shim guy is.
Yep.
If they'd have just not jumped off the deal and just sat there and let him swim by himself up and down, it would become such a debacle. Nobody would, that would be the end of it. But what gets me is these girls' parents that let them do it. Don't let them do that crap.
Right.
Well, I don't know how you can be a champion of women and then allow that to happen.
No,
like,
I don't.
I'm for all these women rights, but you're gonna deny basic biology. And listen, sports is where you're gonna see that difference in men and women the most. That's where girls are at an extreme disadvantage, especially like a physical sport like wrestling or something like that, or
anything.
Baseball, softball. Like you get a guy out there and he's stroking the 16-year-old's fastball pitch or whatever. That's not fair. There's nothing fair to that. Or gunning them down at second base, or God forbid you got a boy playing girls softball and he's catcher and he just tees off on somebody trying to steal home. It's not fair. You can't be an advocate for women and subject them to that.
We just had we had a lady here the other day that's a barrel racer.
Yeah.
And she was talking about the difference between men racing barrels and women racing barrels. The horse does most of the work. A man is stronger and he can control things better. And she said it's an advantage. A man just won the American this February and won $1.5 million, and he won the barrel racing. It's all the rodeo events are together at a big event in Fort Worth, and they have bull riding, they've got roping, they got everything you could imagine. And if you win a certain deal, there's some way there's a big payday if you hit a certain mark. Well, guess who won the $1.5 million over all the big money was a man barrel racer competing against women in rodeo.
Now, if they got rodeos, right? Are you talking about a shim?
No. It was a actual man racing in women's barrel racing.
Well, no.
Yes, he did.
Was it? I don't know how the Americans set up. Is it just men?
No. The barrel racing, I think he was the only man racing in barrels.
See, but I don't know how you get a winner for the American is what I'm saying. Because they have every single rodeo event that you would see at a rodeo. And for some reason, I don't know how the barrel racing one beat like a bareback bronc rider or something like that.
The bronc rider won his event and it paid so much, but I can't tell you either. But there's a tier to it, and if you win this deal by this, you win all this big bonus money. And if you set a record or something, I don't know how it was, but whatever he done, he won like $1.5 million. But could you imagine the guy that rode the bulls, that won the bull event, winning $100,000? He's happy he won $100,000, but Stan over here that's riding the horse, competing against women and competing against them, he beat a bunch of ladies and won $1.5 million. It's stupid. But the men can't race barrels at PRCA, I think, or something, because that's a women's deal. But they can run in these other things and compete against them. And most of the good horses that are out there that the women are riding are trained by men, I believe. I'm going to have somebody come get on my ass about this, because every time I do anyways, because I say something I don't know, and I don't know all the facts on this, but I know a lot of men train the horses that the women ride. And this was a lady barrel racer that told me this, but a man is stronger, which we all know that. And she said he has a distinct advantage on a barrel horse. And I think it's wrong. Just like I think it's wrong for a man to run in women's sports. You could take.
I'll have to. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
You could take the best high school basketball player in Colorado. That's a boy, 17-year-old boy, and he could go to the WNBA tomorrow, and he would score 50 points a game, easy. I mean, it's just the way it is.
I have to ask. I've got friends that are barrel racers, or that are barrel racers. I'll have to ask them if they heard about that. That's man. I tell you, if they got rodeo, I mean, they got NASCAR already. You know, with the woke stuff a couple of years ago. If they got the rodeo, we're in trouble.
This isn't a woke deal. Like, it's not a man thinking he's a woman. It's just a man entering in the women and in barrel racing. And to me, that's a woman's sport. But he has an advantage because he's bigger and stronger. You know?
Okay.
And that's what I'm just saying. It's not just physical stuff. It's not just that stuff. It's golf. Let a man play on let Tiger Woods play on the women's tour. You know, he's not going to win a PGA event again, but I bet you he'd win an LPGA event still.
Mm. Yeah. Wow.
And so now I've pissed off all the women golfers too. But oh well, it kind of goes with the deal. What are you looking up, Andy? The American?
I'm just trying to see how you would win the American.
Yeah, I don't know how it is, but it's some kind of formula they have, because I've watched it. It's a really interesting deal. It's a good rodeo, and it's the best of the best. You got to qualify to win there. So they
take the top 5 in your respective.
So he was one of the top 5 barrel racers. That's something to be proud of, and he's a man.
Yeah.
So,
but I just don't know like what scoring system they use to crown him over a saddle bronc rider or whatever it is.
They have a formula for it.
Right. So that's all I was trying to find.
All right, Geoff, tell us about your book,
The Great Reset.
Okay, so in 2017, in interesting times, you know, us Christians like to look at Bible prophecy and see what we can see, you know, and this goes back to what Mark Twain said, you know, the history doesn't repeat, but it rhymes, you know, and so all throughout history, anytime that things start getting a little dark and a little crazy, you know, the Christians all go to the prophetic books and try to figure out where we are in Bible prophecy. And so I wrote a book in 2017 called Why America Still Matters to God, because there was a real thing happening where everybody was saying America was Babylon. And, you know, that hurts me, you know, to say that, you know, and we had a nice conversation about what we think is going on in our government. You know, there's a lot of things in our culture that are really, really horrible. But man, we just celebrated our 248th day of independence, and man, I always just had this belief that God had a special place, that America was God's idea, right? And so I wrote a book that basically laid out where I thought America was in Bible prophecy. Um, and what I found was a lot of people don't read nonfiction. It's my thing. I like nonfiction myself, but a lot of people don't read nonfiction. So I thought, let me try to write, this generation's version of the late great planet Earth. The dispensational view all came from Hal Lindsey's late great. So let me try to take my views on prophecy and write it into a book, and that's what the Great Reset was. And it's basically, it takes all the prophetic scriptures and speculates, I guess, on how certain things could play out. I changed names, but I do believe there's a very real possibility that we're going to have a strong nationalistic figure running for president that's going to be assassinated, that we're going to have civil unrest, and possibly be invaded. I mean, we've already been invaded, but be invaded, by nations like Russia and some of these Islamic bloc nations. So that is the plot of the book and kind of the purpose of it.
So, in your studies of these prophetic books in the Bible, where do you think we are as a nation?
I believe that we are. I want to say this carefully,
okay.
Right? I believe we are the eschatological, or the last days, house of Israel. In First Kings, you see the division of the kingdom. You had Judah and Israel. Israel was taken away by Assyria and relocated. They were just taken completely out of the land and scattered. And Judah has always remained in that area. And we see modern Israel today would be the eschatological or last days house of Judah. And I believe that when at the return, God's going to reunite those things. And I think that's why you see, even among conservatives today, this alliance between Israel and the United States. I believe that's spiritual as well as political.
Mm-hmm. When did we put Israel there as like the
present day
Israel?
1948.
1948. What was it before then? Was it just this land of? Because basically the thing that makes Israel unique is it's kind of the center point for three major religions, right? And each one is claiming dominion over the other one.
Well, two. The Muslims conquered Jerusalem and then basically claimed it as a holy site, but they did that with every place they conquered.
Okay.
Islam is Mecca and Medina, but that everywhere they conquered, they basically they established a holy place for it, and that was part of their religion.
Where's Mecca? Is that in Saudi Arabia?
I think so. Yeah, I'll be honest with you. I'm not. I've not studied up a lot on that. Not nearly as much as I have. But I can get you a guy if you're interested in that. I can get you a guy that converted from Islam to Christianity.
It is in Saudi Arabia.
Yeah.
Yep. So 1948.
We took this land that was controlled by the Muslims controlled Israel. I don't know a lot about Israeli history either. So in 1948, we put that area there. And now they've expanded since 1948, haven't they?
Well, every time that they were attacked, they took property.
Smart guys.
So yeah, they would, they would be attacked by, their neighbors, and, the result would be they would end up with more property. Then, in an effort to gain peace, they'd give some of it away, and then get attacked again, and they take the property back. And I think they got Jerusalem. You can check it up. In '63 is when they took back Jerusalem. But before that, it was an English province because the Ottoman Empire was taken out in the First World War. Was that? Am I right on that? When when the Ottoman Empire was First World War, and so it was kind of an English province during that time, and there was a Zionist movement in England, and so after World War II, they went basically and created the Jewish state.
So, I got a couple questions about Israel.
Okay.
They
I do not consider myself an expert.
No. But you know a whole lot more than I know, and 90% of our listeners probably too. The Muslims have took over Jerusalem. They also Bethlehem, also, right?
Yeah.
So the Israelis got moved there in 1948. Tel Aviv right now today, I saw something just recently on this. Like 20 or 30% of the people in Tel Aviv are Muslims. So these people live hand in hand next to each other, correct?
Correct.
But Israel has such strong laws on terrorism and stuff. They don't have a lot of problems in the town, do they?
They live in a constant state of war, because they're having to exist in amongst nations that don't think they should exist. I don't want to white knight the things they do, but also I'm not going to, in 1948 that was a desert, right?
It was nothing.
There was nothing there, and they took and created something out of nothing, and spiritually, and it's a spiritual battle. The Gentiles, don't want them there, and that's actually in Bible prophecy. I think in Jesus talked about that. Jerusalem will be under the foot of under the foot of the heathen until the time of the Gentiles is complete. And so, that's what it is. That's what they're at now. Is while they're a sovereign country, they're not really sovereign because they can't do anything unless they have the American government's approval. And we do this nice little thing where we fund both sides of the war, and so the American taxpayers get the privilege of paying for both the terrorists and the Israelis,
Mm-hmm.
right? So it's nice to know that we get to be on both sides of that. So I don't know if I answered your question, but prior to 1948, it was a desert. The people who went in 1948 to reestablish the state created a pretty incredible oasis in the middle of the desert. They're not wanted there. They're hated, and my feeling on that, I don't know that it may make me a Zionist. I'm not sure, but God told Caleb in Numbers that his seed was going to possess that land forever, and that would be, I think, the modern Jewish people.
I watched an interesting documentary called Water. It was 5 or 6 years ago on Netflix. It was really interesting. It's talking about water sources, everything from the avocados and the almonds in California, the avocados in Mexico, and Israel, because Israel controls the only fresh water sources they have. They built these big lakes, and they control all the water.
Right.
And when those people over in Gaza cause them problems, they turn the pipes off. No fresh water. So,
but they created.
Yes, they did. That's right. And they took this. If you're a Muslim, you probably ought to turn this off right now. But the Muslims, everywhere they turns to crap. Minneapolis, Dearborn, Michigan, Israel, France, England right now, Tripoli, Libya. It don't matter where you go. When the Muslims take over, everything goes to crap, unless it's Abu Dhabi, and that's in Saudi Arabia. It's because all that's money's over there. But everything they touch is crap everywhere. And Israel's the same way. But Israel took a crappy place, and the Jews turned it into an amazing country with what they did with their infrastructure and hard work and determination. So hats off to the Jews. I don't know much about the Jews. I'm on their side on everything. I'm not much of a Bible scholar. So this is going to be a really slow process for me because I'm having to really think about everything you talk about. But Hats off to the Jews. So your book, you're going to talk. You talk
Hats
about.
off to the Jews.
Yep, hats off to the Jews,
Okay.
or whatever they call it, the yarmulke, or what do they call that?
The yarmulke.
Yarmulke off for the Jews. There you go.
Yeah. That's an interesting way of putting it. I've never
Hats
off to the Jews.
Oh, they done a great job.
By golly.
God bless them.
Turn something out of nothing. So is that all? Is that what it was in 1948? I mean, were we fulfilling biblical prophecy in that and giving that land back to the Jews?
I believe so. I don't know that. I don't know because it was founded as a secular state. So I don't know that that they were specifically thinking in religious terms. But the things that God uses, go beyond even what we think. God's not surprised that Biden's in the White House. I mean, he knows the end from the beginning. None of this is taking him by surprise. And the same thing with that. The fact that you see this nation that didn't exist all of a sudden exists, and is thriving and excelling is just it's God. And hats off to the Jews, but Geoff, also God did the same thing here, right? This was a wilderness. This continent was a wilderness, and people worshiping God, right, took a wilderness and turned it into a global empire. We did what we always do. The people of God always forget God and turn their backs on him, which is why I think some of the things that are happening. But it's the blessings of God are just upon a people who will do things His way, and we prove that with America. They're proving that in Israel, and it's a huge battle. The battle between the forces of this world and those who will honor and serve God. And so that's what's going on in Israel right now. Even though I think a lot of those people don't I believe that in the end Jesus is going to come in and He's going to be Lord over all. It's that hasn't happened yet, but they still have the covenant blessings on their side.
Michelle always tells me all the time how close we're getting to the end of times. It's the end of times. It's getting close, blah, blah. Let's look at the way our world is and all this is going on. And I'm thinking, I'll bet you if you'd have went back in 1500s and was in England, you'd have said the same thing. And I'll bet during the Civil War, the American Revolution, I said, could you imagine those kids in the trenches in World War I? They thought that was the end of times too. World War II, a family at World War II, every time that green card come in with that white star on the door, everybody knew they were going to come to their house to tell them that their son had passed away fighting in the country. I said, that was... Right. So I don't think things now are as bad as it seems to us. It's bad, but I think that you can go back in history and see a lot of times where it seemed like the world was pretty bleak.
Well, how bad did Sodom and Gomorrah have to be for God to come down?
Can I push back on that a little bit?
Go ahead. Yeah, sure.
All right. Yeah. Because they went through the Great Depression, which happened before World War II, right? And that was a horrible time. Probably worse off than we are economically.
Yes.
Even with inflation. But there's a difference, right? In the 30s, they weren't talking about shims. I've not heard that term before. In the 30s, they weren't talking about redefining marriage. They weren't talking about freedom from religion. Those things weren't as bad as it was, as bad as the circumstances might have been. We're in a Romans 1 moment where as a nation we've turned our back on the God that we used to sing songs about blessing America. We've turned our back on that, and His word says that if His people turn their back on Him, He's not going to keep His hand of protection on them. And I think that would be the difference. Now, I do agree, and whenever I teach this, every generation of believers has believed that they were the last generation.
Yeah.
Right. So even I mean the second book of Thessalonians, Paul's having to write to them and tell them, no, the end times didn't already happen, you didn't miss it, right? So that is true. But the one thing is that if you believe Jesus is really coming back, he's really coming back, and there will be a generation where he does return. And this is the way I look at that prophecy, right? Times get dark and people turn to scripture to try to find answers. That seems kind of like a design, right? That in times of darkness, in times of trouble, that people go back and say, "Oh Lord," and turn back to the good ways. My fear for our country now is that we're so far gone. We don't have that cultural resiliency that we would have had 90 years ago. And I think that would be the big difference between today and any time in the last 2,000 years. We're facing spiritual darkness that I think is unprecedented. There's always wars and rumors of wars. There's always economic ups and downs. There's always hard times, but what we're dealing with now is spiritual warfare on a scale that's you got to go back to Nero probably to see the outright paganism that we're dealing with today. There's a guy in Iowa that flew to Iowa to knock down the satanic statue in the Iowa State House. You imagine a state house, and it was Christians who said it was okay for it to be there because we've bought into multiculturalism, right? That all cultures are equal. They're not equal, right? The Western civilization, built largely upon the precepts of Christ, built all this stuff, that all the infrastructure that we have, just like it built all that stuff in the desert in Israel. Because we've turned our back on that, we're dealing with a spiritual darkness. I think that is unprecedented. And, I think that it will get bad enough that we'll have no choice but to turn back to God. And I think that's part of the design, whether we're in the last of the last days or not.
So what I got out of that was Michelle's right and Jeff's wrong.
Well, I didn't say that, but if you want to take that away, if it gets you back in your Bible, Geoff, to look it up for yourself, I'll say that's a good thing.
What similarities do you see between? Because you mentioned you studied the Roman Empire a lot. What do you see similarities between where we are today and where Rome was in its final years?
It's funny you should ask that. Prior to 476, which is when they deposed the Western Roman Emperor, there was a period of 20 years where the Goths really ran everything, and the Roman Emperor, the Western Roman Emperor, was just a puppet, right? I think that's where we're at now. I don't think that Congress is passing laws that impact the people. I think that most of what all this we have this governmental structure, but I don't think it serves the people anymore. Other than just to distract us and entertain us. We'll all get in and we'll all say, well, we got to vote for this Republican because that Democrat's bad, and the Democrats will say the same thing. I think that and I'm not sure where it stopped, but I don't think that we are a constitutional republic anymore today. And I think that's where Rome was prior to them actually saying, we don't need to even pretend to have a Roman puppet anymore. So, it's kind of a transition period.
Yeah. What do you think about the book of Revelation being written about Nero? Because a lot of people
I don't think it was written about
think
Nero.
that it is, they think that it's this vision into the future, and there's a big proportion of people that believe they were writing about the Emperor Nero. And they said, like, even if you look, I think there's some connections with the 666, and that being, if you look at it in whatever Latin or whatever, it actually spells out Nero.
Right. If you look at the Mark of the Beast.
It's 616, isn't it?
Yeah, well, no, 666. But if you look at that written out, it looks like the like a Muslim symbol as well. But I'll answer your question, but give me a little bit of latitude. Yeah. Everything in the Book of Revelation is a Old Testament prophecy being retold through John about Jesus. Mm-hmm. Okay, some of it I believe happened in AD 70. Some of it I believe will happen at the end. It's the great fallacy of either it all already happened or none of it happened. And I think that there are some things that did happen because Jesus said very specifically, he'd say these things are going to happen and this generation is not going to pass away before this happens. But people will read that phrase, this generation will not pass away, and apply it to everything that he taught. Mm-hmm. There are things we know haven't happened yet, but for example, Jesus hasn't come riding on a white horse. We haven't seen him in the sky. So I believe that there are things that did happen. I believe there are things that are still in our future.
Because in 70 AD, isn't that the year that the temple fell? And that's that's where the connection with 70 AD is with Revelations.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. And so the big argument was, when was Revelation written? Yeah. So the belief that all this was already fulfilled is what they call preterist, meaning that it already happened. And the belief that it's all going to happen in the future is called futurist, right? And so those two sides will argue on when the book was written. I tend for the earlier view, like it was written earlier, but I still think that there are some things in the book that haven't happened. And I'm actually doing a study right now of trying to find all the Old Testament prophecies that John really retold. For example, Revelation 13 is just Daniel 7, with the beasts. Mm-hmm. And so he's just borrowing all this imagery. And I think you go back and go to the Old Testament prophecies and look at what those were. I think it will give you clarity on what Revelation means. Revelation's the hardest book in the Bible to understand.
Yeah, we tried to study it in Bible study, and let me tell you, there were some heated discussions, some gnashing of the teeth, because there's just so much that is open for interpretation, and because you get, and I like to needle people a lot in Bible study just to get them to think, right. Just because it's easy. Christianity, it can be really, really easy if you just take it at the surface level of Jesus came, he died for our sins, and that's as far as you want to go. Right. But I like to poke and prod people. Let's get a little bit deeper into that. You know what I mean? Yep. So that's always that. And Revelations was a really, really easy book for me to do that in.
Who wrote it?
Was it Paul?
John
wrote
it.
Yeah. And it's a lot of controversy because a lot of biblical scholars at the time at the Council of Nicaea, they didn't want the book of Revelations in the Bible.
So when they were putting the canon together, you have to understand that the canon was being put together because they were dealing with Gnostics. Mm-hmm. The reason we have a canon was because people were coming in claiming Jesus said this, and they were claiming this book is these inauthentic books were, and so the church really wanted to recognize canon, and the importance of the canon was to fight the Gnostics, and Revelation didn't really fit that, but what they determined was that if it was written by, for the New Testament, if it was written by an apostle or a contemporary of the apostles, because Luke was put in there and Acts was put in there, if it was written by an apostle or a contemporary of an apostle, that would be canon. Whereas the first generation after them weren't canonized, and that was how Revelation ended up in there, and why some of the next generation's epistles were never included. Not that they're great reading, it's interesting stuff, but that's where the canon was. And we always, what we will do, we'll take Revelation, right? It was written to people who understood Old Testament prophecy.
Mm-hmm.
And so all that imagery that's confusing for us, they were the audience who was getting it, it was very clear to them what John was saying and what he meant. You know, 2,000 years later, it's not so clear. It's very difficult.
Because he was was he in prison when he wrote that?
Yeah,
he had the visions in prison
on the Isle of Patmos.
Yeah.
Which is now your world traveling friend over there. That is a tourist spot.
Yeah, you
now.
can see where he was in prison.
Yeah. So when we make it through this geopolitical upheaval, and you get a chance, you should go check it out. I hear it's a pretty neat place to visit. They revere the Book of Revelation there, though.
Oh, so. Yeah, I bet so. It's where it all came to him.
Right.
I want to switch to Ezekiel a little bit because you've mentioned him. You mentioned the prophecy of Ezekiel 38 in your book. The first part of Ezekiel, are those aliens?
No,
not aliens.
There's no aliens in it. There's no aliens in Ezekiel.
Okay, so let me read this for people that are not familiar with Ezekiel 1:4. I looked and I saw a windstorm coming out of the north, an immense cloud with flashing lights and surrounded by brilliant light. The center of the fire looked like glowing metal, and in the fire was what looked like 4 living creatures. In appearance, their form was human, but each of them had 4 faces and 4 wings. Their legs were straight, their feet were like those of a calf, and gleamed like burnished bronze. Under their wings on their 4 sides, they had human hands. All 4 of them had faces and wings, and the wings of one touched the wings of another. Each one went straight ahead, and they did not turn as they moved. Their faces looked like each of the 4 had the face of a human, and on the right side, each had the face of a lion, and on the left, the face of an ox. Each had the face of an eagle. Such were their faces. They each had 2 wings spreading out upward, each wing touching the creature on either side and covering the body. Each one went straight ahead. Anyway.
That sounds pretty alienish to me.
And then this was appearance.
It sounds pretty forward. He's describing the glory seat of God. If you go to Isaiah 6, he will describe the same thing, only with a lot less detail. Ezekiel's an awesome guy because he's the wordiest prophet.
That was word soup.
He used a lot of words when fewer would do. But Daniel 6 describes the same thing. It's the mercy seat of God.
Okay.
So you think about at least what we see of when we think of aliens and spaceships. It doesn't look like an ox and an eagle and a man and a lion, right? Those things. Geoff, I will send you a link to share with Andy on somebody who basically went through and kind of took on all the ancient alien stuff, and specifically goes into a lot more detail than I could go into. But no, it's not alien.
Not aliens.
But we had giants though, right?
Yes. Now we're in Genesis 6. There were giants on the earth. And if you're interested, you can go to the book of Enoch. And the Enoch goes into a lot more detail on that. Enoch's not canon, so it's not something that...
Is that heresy?
I wouldn't... Well, no, it's not. Think of this as... canon is what you would use to determine what you're going to teach doctrinally. History books would be something that would, not at the level of canon, but it's still history. And Enoch would, depending on what scholar you're talking to, would either be a history book or well, I think it was a mikvah where people wrote something to create a lesson. What's very clear, though, is that multiple times in the New Testament, books like Enoch and Jasher are mentioned by the author.
Right.
So while it's not canon, it was something that they at least referred to get a point across, if that helps.
Yeah.
So yeah, giants were there. You know, Goliath, very famously, was a giant, right? And I believe he was a real giant. I don't believe that he was just a big dude. You know, so.
Well, and what it's Enoch, it's, Thomas, and Thomas another good one that people like to reference.
No, see, I think Thomas is one of the Gnostic.
Is it?
Gospel. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So Thomas is a Gnostic gospel. Enoch was not. People weren't as clear on Enoch because the only version we had was from Ethiopia, and so we didn't even have it in original language until the Dead Sea Scrolls, and you see fragments of the Book of Enoch in the Dead Sea Scrolls, and the parts of that survived line up with pretty well with what you see from Ethiopia. So in recent times, it's gotten more study than it did probably 20 or 30 years ago.
Now, the Dead Sea Scrolls, they were found by a farmer, weren't they?
No, a kid looking for his donkey.
Really?
So yeah, or that's the story.
What year were they found? Do you know off the top of your head?
In 1948.
1948.
It's a good year.
Imagine that.
Holy cow.
Imagine that. Yes. Or 47 or 48. Yeah. So it's in the same period of time. And there. I won't say that I. I'll clarify this just for anybody who's listening and is studied on prophecy. My study of prophecy was very America centric.
Yeah.
Right. So, I'm more confident about that than I am about other stuff. But there is the ancients one speaking from the dust of the earth. There are people who believe that was a fulfillment that the Dead Sea Scrolls were a fulfillment of prophecy. The Book of Enoch actually says that it was written for the time of the end, and if we're at the time of the end, then all of a sudden this newfound interest in Enoch is that we've seen in the last 10 years, might be an indication that Michelle was right.
It's usually the way it goes. That's the way it always goes.
So, now, the Dead...
Right.
Claire, what all did the Dead Sea Scrolls, what all did it have in it? It just had like reference verses that would kind of verify?
No. It's an incredible study. So it had like, I think there was one book, maybe it was Esther. It had every book that we have in our Old Testament, with the exception, I believe it was Esther. Then it had so it had like just the scrolls, right? It would be like the scroll of Isaiah, which is like the most famous one. And then it would have commentary, and then it would have, their views. And the incredible thing about their views, we believe it was the Essenes who were the authors of this, that their view of Messiah lined up very closely to like a Christian view of Messiah. And so, which was very different than the Pharisees had, which the Pharisees believed Messiah would be a general who would kick out the Romans. The Essenes believed that Messiah would be, the suffering servant that would come in and then would come again to say so. It's not exactly Christian, but man, I tell you what, it's really close to how we would view it. They had a community rule which lines up a lot with an ancient book from Christianity called the Didache, which is basically a rule for how you conduct yourself, like kind of a moral law book for Christians. They had something like that for their sect. So yeah, it's really cool. There's a lot of the. It seems to me, this is just my speculation, that probably a lot of the early Christians had some of these same views. It might have even come from that sect, because that sect disappeared, and you don't hear from them again.
Right.
So it's very likely that they all became Christians, or a huge chunk of them did.
Now, do you think that these were hidden at the time and that they were buried and taken away? Or do you think that they were just left behind from the civilization that was there? How did they get, how'd they get where they were?
I think that those people were a apocalyptic group that thought that they were going to be living in the end times. And I think that they got wiped out by the Romans. And so it was just abandoned. I guess if that answers your question.
Right. So it wasn't taken and hidden away.
No, not like the Smithsonian, right? So they're not taking all the ancient stuff that doesn't fit their narrative. That was just those people were wiped out and their library was left behind and revealed at just the right time.
Yeah. So what can we do? If we are living in the end of times, I mean, just get prayed up and have plenty of food and ammunition. And hold on, is there anything that's going to stop this? If this is truly, if we are living in the last days, and let's say we can use a broad term for last days, like let's say it's going to go another 50 years. I'm not saying it's going to end next week,
right?
But let's say things continue. Is this not just what God had planned all along? Like, why are we even trying to, I guess what I'm trying to say, why would we even take an approach to preparing for it if this was what was set out to happen?
God always keeps a remnant.
Okay.
Honestly, God always keeps a remnant, and that's one of the things that you see all throughout Scripture. That when you get to when you're studying out Daniel, which is almost when you get to like Daniel 10, 11, and 12, that's almost as confusing as Revelation. But the story of the Maccabees and what modern day Hanukkah is fashioned on was the Maccabees were a remnant of Judah, and so God promises that He will have a people always. And if you want to know what you should do, you should make sure you're one of God's people. That would be my preaching, and that's why, to speak to Geoff, I think it's a design, right? That when things get bad, people go, oh, and all of a sudden they're in their Bible again. I think that's kind of a design, right? That things get bad, we go to prophecy, we turn back to God, and then there's an awakening. So I don't ever think that's a bad thing. I always say that, when I cover prophecy from the pulpit, I say, every generation is believed that they were the last generation, right? Going back to the Thessalonian church. I'm part of this generation that believes that. But even if I'm wrong, it's a good thing for believers to be in the book and seeking out God. And there will be a time that Jesus comes, or we're wrong, right? And I wouldn't be doing what I do. I can tell you that being a small town preacher is not the most glamorous or financially profitable venture to get into. If I didn't believe that, but I do believe that precious metals like lead are probably pretty good, because Ezekiel talks about, I'm going to call for a sword, right? Well, we don't. I have a decorative sword, but I also have an AR-15, and so I believe that there'll come a time, and in the book, that's kind of the plot, is that it follows a group of people seeking out God, and they're the remnant that God holds on to through the events of Ezekiel 38, which is the plot of the book.
Right. Yeah. I mean, you're not going to be a worse off person if you are studying your Bible. You know what I mean? Like,
right.
Even if we're wrong and this isn't the end of times, like, did it make you a worse person by, scrolling through this book and reading for 15 minutes a day? Probably not.
Right. I think a lot of people get confused with eternity, how long that is.
Forever.
I mean, you don't want to believe in God and do your stuff, your eternity's going to be a whole lot different than mine.
Right.
I'm not a good Christian, but I am a Christian. I believe in God and I'm going to go to heaven. So I suggest everybody else get on that same page. So it definitely cannot hurt you at all.
No.
Geoff, can I just say something?
Sure.
And I don't know, this is more for your audience. I believe that there are a lot of people in this country that don't go to church that are closer to the kingdom than a lot of people who go to church every Sunday.
I would agree with that.
Yep.
And I believe that when that moment hits, right, it's not going to be forgive me for being blunt. It's not going to be the beta males in the pews. It's going to be the sheepdogs that didn't feel comfortable because pastors wanted them to be feminine. The feminization of males in evangelical churches, right? Not all of them, obviously, but I mean enough of them that where men don't feel comfortable, in churches. I believe that a lot of those people are closer to the kingdom than people who go to church, every Sunday. And that's kind of why, even with as bad as all this is, my wife just became an American citizen, and, we got to vote in a primary. She got to vote in her first primary this year. And I'm like, I'm sorry that this was your first year to vote. I apologize. There's not really somebody to vote for, but you need to pray it out and figure out who you should support that you'll feel good about. So I'm actually optimistic. The book ends on a high note. That America's reborn. I believe that America is that city on the hill, and God's letting us reap what we've sown. But I don't believe He's done with us.
How can people buy your book? If they want to buy your book, where do they go to?
Amazon.com. That's where that would be.
And it's Geoffery Broughton, and it's Geoffrey is spelled with a Geofffery, or is it Rey?
Yep.
Is it ERY?
ER.
Just like mine, but mine's spelled the normal way, and yours is spelled the wrong way. And it's
Your parents tried to make it hard on you.
Covenant Nation, the Great Reset.
Yep.
Listen,
Geoff, we appreciate you being on here, my friend. It's really good catching up with you. I enjoy looking at your stuff on Facebook. You're a very good person. Your parents should be very proud. You've done a hell of a job.
Oh, thank you, sir. And I'm looking forward to that sweater.
Yeah. I'll send you that.
Get Geoff your address.
I'll get your just send me your email or your address, and I'll get that sent to you. But anyways, go to Amazon and look up Covenant Nation: The Great Reset by Geoffery Broughton. We appreciate you being on here again, and we'd like to have you on again in the next 6 to 9 months. I love talking. It's funny. We are such a diverse crowd that we do it. I love when we have preachers on here. I really, really, really do. It's some of the most interesting conversations we have, because I don't know anything, and I learn a lot when I have a preacher on.
I want to talk to you more about the Roman Empire, because that is a fascinating piece of history, just by how powerful they were and the fact that they basically fell under their own weight. It's fascinating.
Sounds
to
like
me.
America.
So
So next time we can just talk history.
Perfect.
That'll be good.
We will do that.
I've got some books I need to read first before we do that.
We appreciate it, my friend. You have a great end of your summer, and God bless you and your family.
God bless you too.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Geoffery Broughton, good guy.
Very
great guy. Never knew anybody in my life that did not like him.
Really?
Never, ever.
Nobody
Can't
ever
say
said
that about Jeff Stanfield.
Nobody ever said that son of a bitch, Geoffery Broughton.
No, never at all. Super nice guy. Super. Always has been a really good person.
Yeah.
So glad to see him. He's happy and has a good life.
Go check out his book if you're interested in that. It is a fictional book, which kind of follows some of the. I got it right here. Follows some of the things that's going on here and tells a story. So go check it out.
All right, and you will post up the stuff for the watch giveaway pretty quick. Thank y'all for listening to us. Y'all come see us. We will be at Squad Fest. If you're not going to be at Squad Fest, come see us at Delta in Baton Rouge. The next week will be July 19th and 20th in St. Louis. Will be July 26th, 27th, and 28th in Baton Rouge, Louisiana.
Love you. Bye.
Bye.
Go check out all of our great sponsors. Go check out Hemp Hill Farm. Use our promo code BHP. Alpha Outdoor Specialty, Stanfield Outfitters, Mallard Bay, Mossberg, Double T British Kennels, Ducks Unlimited, Lucky Duck, Looking Glass Podcast, Shin Gear, Mitch Hall Chevrolet, Dirty Duck Coffee, Dive Bomb Industries, Pacific Calls. Use our promo code BHP25. That'll save you 25% off at checkout. Boss Shot Shells and MLR Graphics.